All right, so we've been talking the last couple of weeks about kind of personal growth and personal development and really trying to focus in on how can you make you better. And so what I want to kind of go over today is a little bit of how can you use work and the things that you're working on and kind of the things that you focus on in life to kind of expedite that process, because we spend most of our life, most of our day, 2/3 of our day at work. So it's a really good opportunity to really make that growth have some real impact. And so really when it comes to growth, what are the things that are involved in kind of pushing you? It's the things that you face and the experience that you gather from that, right? So it's kind of a combination of challenges and skills. And so if that's on a kind of a matrix, that therefore is kind of the more challenges you have, or the more skills you have, the bigger challenges you can take on. I think, Brian, you said it once, that at one point, tying your shoe is the biggest challenge that you face in your day. Hopefully over time, those challenges kind of increase in complexity. And so then when it comes down to is the goal then is to kind of have it to where you're focused on taking that line this way and having that being the way that you can leverage yourself and leverage your growth the most. And so when it comes to here is kind of equidistant from your challenges to your skills. So if it's taking it from this perspective, we all have different stages that we're really working in. And so from here, this is kind of your as a skill, you're a beginner. Then as you are able to take on more challenges and you're able to learn on more things, you become more of a novice, then an expert, and then a master. And these are a couple philosophies I've pulled from a few books I've been reading lately, one called Flow and one called Mastery. So it's kind of bringing in some of the elements of both and then kind of expanding on those. And so if you've got these sections more or less of your skill sets, you also have specific challenges that you're going to face that also kind of fall into that same sort of striation, to where there's certain challenges that the beginner can take on, there's certain ones that the novice can take on, so forth and so on. And so if you look, you kind of see that there's actually kind of some patterns inside of these dotted lines that, if you look kind of along this spectrum here, what do you see? In comparison of the blocks that the line goes through and act like it's a straight line and it's all in alignment versus the ones that are around it. What do you guys see?
Some take longer than others.
Okay. Look at the shapes specifically. These are, what do you see? More square, where these are more kind of rectangles. You guys see that? And so what you're going to find then, when you see this pattern here, it's kind of, and then it's kind of open-ended from there. What you find along the way is this is when you're kind of balanced. You're not reaching too far and you're not pushing too far back. And so, let's say that you're here in the novice section. And so there's kind of 3 sections here. So you've got 1, 2, and 3. And so if you're in this section here, this is your challenge, but this is your skill. What happens? What happens in this situation?
You're going to spin your wheels a bit.
So you're going to spin your wheels a bit. You're not going to have necessarily a whole lot of success consistently. So here is you're probably going to be a little overwhelmed, because what's going to happen here is you're going to lose more than you're going to win, right? Because this is challenges that are a little above your pay grade, if you will. Now let's look at this one. When you've got your challenge here, but your skill's there, what's that situation look like?
Get bored.
Right. You're gonna get bored. And why is that?
You're just kind of doing the same small challenges that you've already.
Just tying shoes every day.
Right. So you're gonna win a lot more than you're gonna lose. And then when you get to this section, what happens here? It's balanced. So it's gonna be, it's gonna be pretty competitive. You're gonna win about as often as you lose, right? And so this situation happens, every day with a lot of different things that you work on. And this is the key, is to try to figure out kind of where you're at in this whole kind of pattern and situation. And so, if we take this and kind of extrapolate it down, if this is your challenge and this is your skill, if you see with these boxes, it's really kind of a cone more than an arrow. So if you look at it from this perspective, you're kind of like this. So if you're in this section here, where your challenges are greater than what your skills can account for, so you're going to end up in this section here, correct? Because you're top side. And so here you're really going to be stressed. You're going to be overwhelmed, you're going to be stressed. It's going to be something that you're really having to push further and harder than what you're really capable of doing. Down here, when you're bored, it's kind of apathy. You're not really pushing yourself, you're not really challenging yourself. What you're doing isn't making you expand your skill sets. You're just kind of going through the motions. And then in this section here is really where your growth is. And so this is the space where it's a good competition that you're going to be able to win as much as you lose. This reminds me of when I was growing up on the farm out in Dittmer. It was all my cousins and all my family lived around there, and there was a bunch of cousins around the same age. I was kind of the middle piece between the younger section of them and the older section of them, and we played a lot of sports. And so when I played with the older kids, I got my butt kicked a lot, but it made me a lot better. Sometimes I came home with bloody lips and whatever it may be, but it was a real struggle and real challenge. When I played with the younger kids, it wasn't even fun because I was used to really competing at a high level. When I played with them, it would just be straight domination and it wouldn't be any fun. Over time, when I got a little bit older and a little bit bigger, they were all a lot bigger than me, but I was also much faster than them. So then I could actually win about as often as I was getting caught and then getting pummeled. And that's what made it fun. And so it comes back into this situation is you got to find that balance. And so, have any of you guys ever, with apathy, have you ever broken an arm or broken a leg and had a cast on for a long time? You know what happens, or if you've seen someone, that muscle atrophies. That's what happens here, is you're not using your skill sets to the ultimate challenge, so you're just gonna kind of flatline and you're gonna not really grow those muscles as well as you could. On the upper side, it's overuse. It's if you try working out too hard, too fast, too much, you end up injuring yourself. You can make some big strides at first, but what will end up happening is you're going to pull a muscle, you're going to rip a muscle off the bone. If you're on steroids, other things are going to create some fun problems if you're on the roids. But if you stay in a really good zone and you take your time and you're focused on a good regimen, then you're going to grow over time. And obviously, this is something that there's lots of things all the time that you're facing, and so it's not an easy straight line. There's nothing really ever is. It's the same kind of thing when we talked about the flight plan, when it's really it's like this, but you end up where you want to go. It's the same thing here. basically throughout the whole time in this cone, sometimes you're going to take on too much, sometimes it's going to be too little, and it's going to be kind of like this. But the key is to try to stay as much within this zone as you can so you don't get overwhelmed or you don't get atrophied. And that's the real key here is knowing when to push yourself to your upper bounds, but recognize when you're getting to that line of what's healthy growth and what's overwhelmingly stressful. And so, if you turn this piece kind of on its side, you'll see that it's kind of like this. All right, so if we take these lines across and kind of take the same element here of, the kind of the beginner, the novice, the expert, and the master, then you can start kind of applying this to your task list, to the things that you're working on a given day. And so what you want to identify is kind of where you're at with that specific thing, because you might be a beginner in WordPress development but an expert in design, or you might be really good at decently good at messaging and really good at something else. And so you got to understand, kind of know thyself fairly well. But what you can then do is start kind of identifying what you're doing and where it is in this kind of cone area. Because what you want to be focused on is leveraging your time in the things that are going to return the greatest return on time for yourself, for your growth, and then obviously for the company. And so when you identify kind of where you're at in the specific skill sets and the specific challenges, then you can start identifying where you are here. And so where do you guys think that if, say, you're an expert, what work should you be focusing on as an expert in what you're doing? So you should be focused, so if you're at an expert level, you should be focused kind of in, we're talking about a cone area, so kind of in this space. So you should be focusing on, a lot of your expert work, but then also some of the novice stuff, right? So why would it be important to also still be doing the novice work?
Enforcing previously learned techniques.
Right. So it's reinforcing your fundamentals. So it's practicing the things that made you able to build on top of this. Because what you've got to get to the point is where you can do the level below systematically. Like it's just, we've talked about that, where you can get it to the point where it's kind of the subconscious takes in and takes over. And that's when you can kind of get to that next level, is when you don't even have to think about doing this and you win almost every time. And that's when you know that you can kind of move up to the next level. But it's important to continue to do some of the novice stuff, even when you're an expert, from an efficiency standpoint. Because if you think about it, if everyone was pushing on the upper bounds of what they were capable of all the time, when you're winning as much as you're losing, that also means that the losses are learning, but that's not productive cash generating activity. So in business, there's got to be a balance to where you're effective and efficient. And so you've got to kind of bring in some elements of all of three of these to make sure that you're kind of doing the flight plan and bringing in that effectiveness and efficiency so you can be executing at a high level. So if you know that you need to be in this area and you can do this with your eyes closed, does it make any sense to be doing this? Why?
Not wasting your time. I mean, someone else could do it.
Because it's just too easy. So it's too fundamental. And so the thing to keep in mind is all of us are on different levels on different things at different times. And so, what's expert work to you, or what's beginner work to you, is expert work to someone else. And so that's the key, is if we can have a variant of people with different skills and experiences, then we can make sure that everyone's staying in this funnel. And so, this is a lot of times when what's great about having new interns come in every 3 months like we do, every 4 months, is because then at that point, they can be focused on learning these new things here that is just rudimentary, boring old stuff for you, but it's new and exhilarating, exciting things for them because it's in their zone. So what's key is to realize that, what's expert work to one, might be beginner work for another, and it's important to understand that balance and understand where and how to recognize that. But the other thing to keep in mind is beginner work does not mean crap work. This is something to really keep in mind, is we all have to do things that we might construe as being crap work. I mean, that's just part of doing stuff. But this is where you have to delineate those things, because there's expert crap work and there's beginner crap work. Don't think that because you're dumping something on a beginner that they're not going to want to do that, because it could be something that is exciting for them. On the flip side, don't go dumping all of this on someone because you just don't want to do it. So that's a really fine line to walk. And so when you bring this all together, it's really about leverage. It's about leveraging your time and returning the highest amount of impact that you can have on what you're doing. And that's really going to drive your trajectory and your growth up, as well as it's going to drive the value of the work that you're doing. Where else have you guys seen this in some of the work that you've done?
I guess like a beginning service ticket for like WordPress and the developers that get it. Maybe beginning crap to them, but it would be my next level for myself, not knowing a whole lot about WordPress.
So that's perfectly in alignment with this. To Denny, this is brand new, exciting work that's in this area. But for you guys that are up here, that's like, ugh, I don't want to have to mess with that. But it's really exciting stuff, and really exciting to learn new skills, and then it's going to make him a better designer and allow him to look at websites in a different perspective. So it's really just important, once again, this is about perspective, of just being able to separate beginner from what you guys perceive as crap work.
I think that's why we have good people on our team, like Bradford, who's in that bottom section but wants to be at the top, so he goes and gets into the HTML all the time and tries to fix it. So I think that's a good quality of the team that we have. And I know that on the development team, we've talked more about, we all have our skill sets, and we try to put projects where they are, but also we try to mix them up and get around so that other people can grow those other skill sets as well. So I think we're starting to do a better job of taking that into consideration as we're discussing right now.
For sure. So the important piece is to not only know thyself, but know thy team, and know who you can utilize to do what is going to be exciting work for them, in ways that they can grow, in ways that they can develop. So it's really about having a team of people who are all trying to push up and to the right, and understanding where their skill sets are and where they're at in these components.
Looking at it from like a whole team point of view, I can use the dev team, and they all have their specialties where they're going to be the expert in that. So as a whole team, like maybe they're just novice, say, as a team, but each of them is pushing the level separately in an expert thing, so then the whole team can go up that curve. And even though each person doesn't become an expert, the team does move forward on that, so that the whole team can face those challenges and be unified and work together.
Yeah, so I mean, like almost everything else that we've talked about, this kind of fractals in and fractals out from the standpoint of, you can look at this from an individual standpoint, from a department standpoint, from a company standpoint. If you have a lot of experts on your team, then the team will be more expert. But you also need to have some of the beginners and novice that are kind of learning underneath as well. And then if you have teams who are all experts, then you're going to have a company that is more kind of expert driven as well. So the thing to keep in mind, the real takeaway from this is to really focus in on identifying where your skills are, where your challenges are, and when you're getting stressed, try to identify what's causing that stress. Is it because you've kind of went a little bit too far north of your center line? If so, then ask for help from somebody who might be a little more skilled in what you're working on. Is it that there's too much? Well, then, then that means that the challenge that you're trying to do is multitasking too many things, which you haven't developed that skill to do yet. So then you need to ask for help. So you need to realize when you're stressing what's causing that stress and be able to pull it back down into your growth zone. And on the other side, if you're not growing and you're becoming apathetic and your muscles are atrophying, what do you need to do to increase the challenge level of what you're doing in order to kind of get back to that growth? So some good homework is to identify where you're at with certain things and list your tasks and put them in this kind of categorization, and be honest with yourself on where you think you're at on the skill level and where these challenge levels are, and try to see where these things are. And so if you're overreaching too much, try to ask for help and delegate some of those things off. If you're not doing hard enough stuff, figure out where you can challenge yourself a little more and be asking for some more difficult challenges to take on. But it really comes with, you first have to take an inventory and make a list of, what are the things I do, what are the things that are stress me out, what are the things that make me grow, and what are the things that make me die. And then you can really get a full assessment of where you're at. So that would be, I would say, some good homework is to, take a look at your day, take a look at your week, take a look at your month, and figure out how much of your day is spent in this growth zone, and try to put more of the things you do into that zone. And what we'll talk about next week is how that process and what that allows you to do is really a piece of that is in kind of the key to happiness is kind of hidden in there a little bit on how can you become self-sufficient in generating your happiness and being able to figure that out. So a little cliffhanger for next week.